Good morning, everyone. I'm not too surprised that folks are still trickling in. I mean, for a lot of folks, it's going to be the first time in Amsterdam. I'm sure late night was just early yesterday for a lot of folks, so I'll be probably doing the same. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jorge Palma. I'm the lead PM for Azure Kubernetes Service, and we're going to kick off the day that, as Corey mentioned, is going to be fairly packed with a lot of topics. We're going to try and slow it down a bit because we have quite a lot of things, but help us out as well with kind of putting your questions out and also asking us to make a deep dive or go at different speeds. But we do have a lot of content to go through today, and so let's get started right away. To frame how we kind of approach both this day and how we prepare some of this content, and also what we've been doing over probably the past year, it is of no surprise that we've really been seeing and continuing to see pretty challenging times. Everybody fairly aware of things like inflation, the rise of energy prices, monetary policy, financial institutions struggling, geopolitical changes, supply chain disruptions, and even in the midst of things like layoffs, there's still talent shortages, there's still increased labor costs. So the outlook seems otherwise pretty grim, and seems challenging to say the least. This, however, still presents a tremendous amount of opportunity. We could refer to old sayings of like in crisis, you get the best opportunities, and some of the best opportunities come in times of crisis. I'm not super sure what the definition of crisis that we should be using, or if we are in one or not. But nonetheless, we definitely see a lot of potential and opportunity still trickling in. On one hand, I'm sure pretty much everyone in this room, your businesses, your companies, your teams, are going to some degree of kind of tighter fiscal and financial policies. The governments, countries, institutions are doing a lot of the same, ensuring that you are tightening the budget, that you are preparing for what's ahead, for what's here today. But that also presents a lot of opportunities for you, for your businesses, your applications, to disrupt a lot of the established things. We've seen not starting anymore, but actually accelerated, actually already out there, digital transformation with all businesses really recognizing their technical businesses, and a lot of them really going fast over the last few years, especially when fueled by the pandemic years of rapid growth. They really have transformed, they really have digitized. However, a lot of that was done without a lot of efficiency, though. And herein lies an opportunity for both you, your customers, your users, to really take advantage of. The other point is, as always, consumers and users are going to be ever demanding. They're going to continue to ask for more. The bar just keeps raising, never lowers. And in times right now, if you look at a lot of your own experiences as you use your computer, your mobile phone, and the apps they use every day, just think a bit of how much do you actually tolerate mediocre experiences these days. I know that at the very least me, as I open a new app or something, there's a little bit of a bar that I've noticed and that I recognize has really, really changed over time. And if I look at an experience that is even somewhat average, I'm going to pretty much recognize, okay, that one is not going to continue. I wonder how long it was going to try. This is a great learning on fault tolerance. We're going to talk about more there today. So, as I was saying, as customers really raise their bars, you're going to save the day?
I'm going to save the day.
All right. Watch out. There we go. Good job, gentlemen. Appreciate it. So as I was saying, as customers really raise the bar and continue to raise the bar, they've done so ever more during the pandemic times, where everything became digital, everything became more accessible to consumers, more democratized for users, and that raised the bar across many, many things. Every experience that we build today demands that every interaction at every single step of a user interaction that becomes a well-thought, crafted experience for the user. And on the other hand, kind of downtime and any slowness, latency is not that well tolerated by users, by the businesses, that much anymore. And so the need for applications to be more flexible, more reliable, for businesses and teams to be more agile, have more speed, is very important for your teams and your business to be future-proof at the end of the day, is also a big, big opportunity. If you are resilient and you not only survive these times, but thrive in these times, you're going to be much stronger and much more resilient ahead. And finally, with kind of the piece that we saw before, it's both a challenge and an opportunity. As we think about sustainability, energy independence, energy costs, that is, yes, a challenge that we see today, but is at the same time a great opportunity that we have, because as users demand that everything that they do and use is more sustainable, is more energy conscious, carbon aware, that also opens an opportunity for teams and businesses to bake that in and to ensure that they respond to that need. As usual, and I assume most folks here are somehow in the technology business, or at least representing the technology side of your organization. Anyone here would say you don't work with technology and software at all? This is the opposite of a normal question. I don't want to see any hands up, kind of, so that's good. There's also peer pressure to see if anyone raised their hands. And so really, as we see every business being a tech business, technology is really the foundation that we're going to be using here in order to address some of these challenges and also reap some of these opportunities and go after some of these great opportunities that we see today. So on one hand, as I mentioned before, we saw that even though there was a lot of innovation, a lot of acceleration throughout the pandemic, most of it was done a bit too fast by necessity, because the pandemic demanded that every business became digital, that every business became remote. And that also started to compound and it started to accelerate. But it didn't do so as much in a super optimized way, in a super efficient way. And so we see a lot of those challenges now of added complexity, added cost that a lot of the architectures and solutions had over time. A lot of the things that were done with a very short-term mentality. I know we did a lot of those ourselves. And so that now is kind of having its own consequences and has teams rethinking how their investments were done and how their investments are going to be done. I mean, we shifted aggressively from, months of decision between what type of box are we going to buy for a rack to let's try this service right away. It should meet this need right now with very little care if that's going to suit us in the future, or if, as we grow the application or as we grow the team, that's the direction we want to go. And so probably the right answer lies somewhere in between these two places and not in one of the extremes. The other point is, how much did companies actually adopted things versus transform themselves? And that's another problem. I used to make an old joke of when you break down a monolith into microservices, 9 times out of 10 you get a distributed monolith versus an actual microservice architecture. And that's a little bit what we also saw with teams, where a lot of them, yes, did embrace some cloud-native principles and technologies, but very few actually became cloud-first and cloud-native and started to reap the benefits of that to its full potential. So that's the next opportunity we have is, are we actually getting everything we can out of our investments? Not just making sure they're efficient, but also getting the maximum possible return on each dollar, essentially. And then obviously the other point is, we continue to see, sometimes due to that fast pace, sometimes due to that adoption, and sometimes just because the world is, once again, the bar for users is high and the bar for attacks is also high. We continue to see security risks, we continue to see vulnerabilities exploited more and more, and at least gaining more presence in the news. All right, so what can we do with Azure Kubernetes Service with our portfolio of cloud-native services, and what have we been doing and what are we doing in order to help you, ideally, with a lot of these challenges and a lot of these opportunities. So the first thing is all about achieving that efficiency by allowing you to kind of, yes, modernize your applications and your processes, doing so in a secure manner from the start, and doing so in a way that is with excellency, meaning that you're actually on your processes, on your best practices, on your architectures, on your governance, you're doing so in a way that is, again, future-proof for your company, your business, and your teams. The second is maximizing the value. Again, the bang for buck, as I mentioned before. Are you actually getting and realizing the full potential of the cloud and all these things? Or are you actually doing what I'm going to be repeating a few times today? Are you actually doing tasks that are differentiated or tasks that are indifferentiated? Meaning things that are specifically and directly related to your business and are going to move it forward, or doing tasks that pretty much every company out there is going to be doing anyway. And I don't think I'm going to say anything controversial if I'm going to say that any undifferentiated task is not going to make you emerge stronger, is not going to make you differentiate, is not going to make you more productive, is not going to give you any competitive advantage. That's all in the differentiated side. So everything that you're doing that is not directly contributing to that is in some ways, not all, but in some ways, wasted time. Time that you could be investing into actually becoming more competitive, becoming more resilient, anti-fragile, etc. And the other point is, in order to also emerge stronger, you need to be able to adopt a lot of the new trends. I mean, AI, I don't need to talk that much about it, right? It's been everywhere and anywhere as you look left and right. The advent of AI, the democratization of it, the full power, as some have put, of it, and the ability to harness it at speed, pace, efficacy that was never possible before, really also opens the door for you to again leapfrog forward and to reap a lot of these benefits. And finally, the ability to be productive. Because as I think it was Toyota, if I recall correctly, that had its assembly process and its assembly line be extremely, extremely efficient, extremely well tailored for what they needed. And that made a lot of their mainstream cars tremendous success. The most selling, I think the Corolla, etc., was for a long time, it's not still the most sold car in the world. And they eventually actually open sourced that process. They gave it away for free, and very few to know were actually able to implement it, even though it was there and they explained it. That's because it's a lot harder than it seems to actually achieve true productivity, true efficiency, and that actually gives you, if you achieve it, true competitive advantage, because it's not that easy to replicate, and more importantly than just broad productivity is how does that apply to you? Because even though a lot of common things are across all of us, probably the way that the AKS team is productive and how we become more productive might not be exactly the same. We might use same principles, maybe same tools, but there are going to be differences between how we operate and how you operate. It's all about tailoring it to the needs of our business and our teams. All right, so let's start to jump into it and walk me into these three pieces then. The first one being achieving efficiency with excellence. Today, we've seen, and I have the references there, and as Corey mentioned, you're going to get all these slides and these recordings, and you can go through these white papers and to these studies that I'm going to be sharing. But today we see that about 34% of costs, of workload costs, can be optimized with AKS. We actually are working on studies today of how much that is within AKS itself, so how much of AKS environments can be optimized. This is from non into AKS. But it can optimize 34%, up to 34% of costs. Now, I'll jump ahead and say, this is not out of the box. AKS being the Lego box that it serves, Kubernetes being the Lego box that it is, it caters to every single, workload under the sun, to any use case under the sun, and that means that it can be optimized immediately for all of it. Now, we are fighting the good fight in this area because we do want it to be like that. We do want it that When you create it for whatever workload, it is optimized for it, but it's not something that overnight we're going to be able to achieve. And so the reality is today, you might need to do some optimization of your environments in order to optimize it for your workloads and for your needs. And we're going to talk a lot about today and in the next sessions about how to do exactly that for both cost, but also performance and scale, and enable you to do this very easily. Second is automation. Again, I said I was going to talk a lot about it. Differentiated versus undifferentiated tasks. This is all about making every undifferentiated task non-existent, deferring it as much as possible, offloading it as much as possible, so you can spend every working hour, waking hour, however invested you are, hopefully it's just working hours, into differentiated tasks itself. And finally, it's about, again, being and modernizing your applications and using cloud-native tools and principles to increase your speed. So what does that actually mean in terms of AKS, the product itself? So on one hand, and I think I've made this claim before, and it raised some eyebrows, and so as usual, I'm going to make it again. So the first thing is, you can achieve the best price and TCO for pretty much any environment with AKS. As I said before, and I'm willing to be challenged on this, by the way, I usually make the joke on, if you can find a well-architected service and platform that does it cheaper, we'll give you your money back. It's quite easy because technically AKS is free, but even if it wasn't, we would still stand by that claim. And if you're using SLA, we're happy to do that as well. Now, the big caveat here is the well-architected part. As I mentioned, you're not going to create a cluster out of the box, and it's going to be optimized, efficient for every single thing out there. It's going to be hitting just the middle spot. You're going to run. The performance is going to be acceptable, but can you get more performance? Yes. We provide knobs for it, from custom node configurations to different types of SKUs, storage, and all the different pieces. Can you get lower prices? Absolutely. The point here is you can get the highest performance and the lowest price possible in the right architecture. We're going to be talking about today is about how we're making this more automatic and easier for you. And we're going to see that in a second. Speaking of speed, provisioning speed, scaling speed is extremely important. We ourselves, as I shared a few times before, we run AKS on AKS. We love the circular dependency. We break ourselves into jail every day, often, as many times as possible. That's our aggressive way of eating our own dog food. That actually means that the speed of AKS, creating, scaling, deleting, affects us daily. And we hope that our use case is actually shared across many of our users. We expect to have users using AKS, for PR-based development, standing up clusters for tests and test and dev, doing PR-based clusters, tearing up and down, start and stopping, all to, again, have the highest efficiency, lowest cost possible. So this time matters a lot. We had users, and I've shared case studies in this deck as well, that have reduced their time to development based on just the latency of AKS creating, standing up environments, etc., by over 90%. And that is a lot of time to do whatever you want. It could be drinking coffee, could be working on something else, but it is a lot of time that you can get back. The other point is, and we have a session on it today, is about all the knobs, the controls, the policy that we have from a security perspective. We have been, over the last few years, aggressively going after pretty much every compliance, every standard out there, and ensuring that AKS is compliant with it and that you have the knobs for your applications to pass any audit request and requirement out there. We've been trying to stay ahead of it as much as possible, at the expense oftentimes of having a feature that looks very fringe at the beginning that then takes off massively over time. We've had that over the years already several times, and we're happy to continue to have it. It's better for us to have a feature a bit dormant for a year then have a regulation hit us and you and your users overnight, and you not having the right control for it. And then naturally, world-class best practices, the availability for you to be able to implement things with, be it landing zones or our documentation. An interesting thing is, if any of you here is interested in collaborating in an architecture, reference architecture of a specific use case, you want our validation on it, you want us to take a look, just let us know. We're super happy to do it. We're super happy to partner and publish some of these things. We have folks in the room. There are some of our black belts and solution architects that do this daily and that are also super happy to chat and to partner and to build a lot of these things, this color that you can reuse even internally. So if you're looking at ways to establish practices, looking at ways to ensure your teams are following standards, and you want to have something and you're trying to find help partners, we're happy to do that. Super happy. It's a world of content that we have out there, and there's yet another universe that is still to be filled. So we're super happy to continue to do it. Let us know what you need, and if you want to partner, we're super happy to do so as well. And finally, version management and upgrade. I think possibly the bane of the existence of everybody in using Kubernetes and cloud native, especially if you're coming from more traditional spaces or pretty much anywhere else. The speed of development of the Kubernetes project, of the cloud native ecosystem, is tremendous. And that is great from an innovation perspective, from new features, from new functionality, from just completely breaking barriers and being in the tip of the sphere. However, it does pose a challenge of very frequent need for upgrades for revving versions. And we've heard folks, AKS has been in the, I would say, most extreme alignment with upstream as possible. We want to ensure that AKS is vanilla Kubernetes 100%. And to do so, we need to be super aligned with upstream, meaning the 3 versions that upstream supports are the ones that we support. And the only way for us to fully support, in what we define as fully support Kubernetes, is to be aligned with those 3 versions. That is very fast. And if folks step away from those, we can no longer give what we call full support, which means everything from ensuring that the racks are powered on to the VMs and the load balancers are running fine, all the way to the Kubernetes components and the add-ons that we have. So if we can't provide that full support when upstream goes out of support because there's no more patches, we only had 2 options. One is just letting clusters run wild, unpatched, and insecure. The second is forking Kubernetes, and both of them seem pretty nasty for us. So we haven't done, until now, anything on these 2 areas. We just stick to aligning with upstream, the upstream train, and ensuring that our users are able to do so as well. So we're shipping versions as quick as possible, and we're aligning with that. But again, that's not meeting all use cases. We've talked to customers, we've talked to users that have told us, I understand that, and I see that, and I don't want to be insecure, but I also can't keep up. I need something in between. And we've literally asked, would you be okay to be in a fork? We haven't done that transparently because we were concerned about portability, which is one of the key tenets of Kubernetes, is the ability to be portable across everywhere, which is why we have the commitment to stay vanilla Kubernetes everywhere, anywhere. All our solutions are open source first, working Kubernetes first. So doing a fork for that single purpose seemed very risky and very dangerous. So we asked users, how would you use this? How would you like this? And what we got was a very interesting, and I'm paraphrasing a lot of users now, answer, which was, for most of my workloads, my cloud-native workloads, that can be fine, but I have a lot of workloads or teams or units that would be better served with more support, even if at the cost of a fork. So long as that fork doesn't diverge too much from upstream, if you can guarantee more time and still full support, we would take that. Maybe not for every workload, but for the ones that, honestly, is that leave it there and don't touch it for a while, we really need this. As ISVs, as software vendors, aligning your versions, AKS versions, Kubernetes versions, your customers, maybe other software, it's challenging. And so Today, we're happy to announce that AKS is releasing the first Kubernetes long-term support version. That means that we're going to be shipping Kubernetes long-term support versions that will have full support for 2 years, while still maintaining our commitment to have always the last 3 upstream Kubernetes versions and continuing that train. So nothing changes from today on what's available, but we'll be adding 1 version per cycle that will be our LTS version. So for all of you in IT, you know how operating systems have been doing this. It's not rocket science in terms of the process. The real hard part is what has been putting us a little bit away is that it's pretty Herculean to actually go into the Kubernetes project and continuously cherry pick security fixes into an out-of-support version, because we need to essentially replicate what the whole Kubernetes community is doing, from pipelines, testing, cherry picking, engineering effort, which is not little. If you looked at the Kubernetes project, there's a huge amount of work that goes into it. In addition to that, you're going to be able to stay within LTS versions. You're going to be able to upgrade from LTS version 1 to LTS version 2, meaning that you can continuously stay in those 2-year windows as with operating system. So you can go from one LTS to the other, and we'll offer that upgrade pass. You're also going to be able, this is not a all or nothing, so you will have paths. You can't just randomly go into an LTS version back and forth, because there's only so many test paths and upgrade paths that we can test in order for your upgrades to be secure. But you're going to have a path to go out of the LTS versions and, let's say, go into the upstream. Common case for legacy workloads that are being modernized and you do want to stay in the train, but you just can't right now. And to get in as well. And by the way, when we say full support, you're going to have all the range of possibilities that AKS allows. So you're going to be able to create clusters of LTS versions at any time during those 2 years, any node pools at any time during those 2 years. The way we're doing it, and I put it on the slide because I want to be extremely transparent, is we have to fork Kubernetes. However, we're going to be doing it completely in the open. We literally just published last night the Kubernetes LTS organization that we are going to be trying to rally the community around again. Several efforts have been done in the LTS working group, and we're going to try and rally those efforts again. And we will start that by ourselves now, but we hope that the community really picks off and the Kubernetes LTS becomes more and more prevalent across the community and is available everywhere for you. So everything that we do in this work is going to be still in the open, still coming from upstream, and is going to be exclusively on the security side. So we're going to be looking at the security tagged issues upstream and ensuring that all of them are in that Kubernetes fork. The second thing is AKS moving forward will have a fully managed resource group. So for those of you that are heavy AKS users, the node resource group, you might know what it is, you might have seen it, and you might even have issues with it to some extent. We've seen users struggle with it for quite some time. We have often been in this position of saying, this is how you should do things. You shouldn't be doing this, you should be doing it this way, and get a very fair response back is like, then why did you allow me to go this way? And so this is what the fully managed resource group comes to solve. With fully managed resource group, that node and that infrastructure resource group that is owned by the AKS resource itself, but today is actually possible to be edited and to be changed and to be tinkered with and broken, will no longer be writable. So you're only going to be able to read that resource group. You're going to still be able to see it and look at everything the same way, but everything that you do or your teams anywhere is not possible directly in that resource group. Every operation you might want to do is still going to be possible through the AKS resource itself. So if you want to put policies, or you want to apply tags to resources, or you want to, whatever is your use case, so long as you go through the AKS resource, that will all be propagated to the resources in that resource group, but you just are not going to be able to literally change them. So the way that that basically works is if you're in a regular, call them MC underscores or node resource groups, and you try to change something really quickly, like deleting a VM directly through the VMSS, which is awful. you're actually going to get an error as if you didn't have permissions to it, which until today, if you're like an owner or a contributor of the subscription, you would be able to. You might know that if you give someone a resource group and they create a cluster, they're not going to see this resource group, but if you had the whole subscription, you would. So regardless of your permission, the AKS resource is now the only entity that can manage, and Kubernetes obviously, the only entity that can manage this resource group and that can actually alter it and change it. This is currently in preview, and it will remain so as we kind of flesh out all the use cases. The reason for it to be preview is basically so we can slowly move it into becoming the actual default. There's actually no big preview period that we're expecting for this, so expect to GA it really, really soon over the upcoming weeks even, so that you are able to opt in all your clusters into us first, and then we can evaluate with you, with your feedback, if that's something that should just roll out as default for all of AKS. All right. Next up, so how do we continue to help with efficiency? How do we continue to help with cost? How do we continue to help with automating further operations? So we've been working on something that we've called tentatively node auto provision that has been essentially, I think, the biggest ask from our users over recent times, which is very much aligned to all the three things that I said. How can, you tell me this about reducing costs, but how are you helping me? Can you make it automatic? Oh, yes, operations are automatic, but I still need to create node pools, or I still need to decide SKUs, and then I have capacity, and then I have to deal with quota. Can you automate that? Can you help with that? And so we've been working on node auto provision to solve exactly that. That have the ability to automatically bin pack, to just receive essentially YAML manifests, declaring what type of resources and infrastructure they need, and then letting AKS and the service actually provision it for you on demand, and to then bin pack it further, optimize further for cost, optimize for performance for any heuristics that you determine. The way that it works is hopefully very simple. The way that it actually works is a little bit more complex, but the way that at least you can use it should be rather simple. If you have a deployment as right here with 30 replicas that you just saw, and we just lost the slides. We're back. Let me go back so that you don't think that there's some scheming going on here. So you have 30 replicas, regular deployment. We're reserving, 0.25, so a quarter of a CPU, few megs of RAM. We have one agent, a regular agent, just one, that node pool. We're not going to care too much about that one. The goal here is, what are we going to provision for these workloads? And so what's going to happen is, as we deploy that manifest, the controllers are going to detect exactly what you need. They're going to detect what your restrictions are. Maybe you have reserved instances, maybe you have different heuristics, and they're going to literally select a SKU or SKUs necessary for these workloads. And so what's going to happen, hopefully in a few seconds, is that a virtual machine, as you see at the bottom, is actually going to be created, fully configured. So similar to autoscale, except we're not autoscaling that node pool. We're actually going to create a whole new node pool and a whole new set of nodes for these workloads specifically that are automatically managed. So there we go. We see essentially the VM now being created. You can now watch it right there. It's not ready, so it's registering to Kubernetes. So doing the exact same flow of a node coming in. And this is the dangers of letting things run its due course. So I need to walk back and forth a bit more. So again, there's still some things missing. The status is now ready. You see the roles being populated. You see the daemon sets are already scheduled there. Those 5 that you see there. And these ones are still pending. So the 30 pods that we have waiting for that node to become schedulable and for Kubernetes to detect that. So as we just wait for this, I'm going to go ahead and actually deploy the large one. So very similar case, except in this case, we just have kind of 8 replicas, and it's just a lot of memory in this case, and 3 CPUs. So the SKU that was just selected, that you actually can just go ahead and see, is not going to be enough. And so once again, it's going to check what our restrictions are, what kind of SKUs from the list we can use in case you're restricting it. And from there, It's going to select a new one, in this case, the D32 LDS, which is a special one with a lot of memory, and it's going to provision this one and select this one as the best one for these 8 replicas. So in this case, it's literally going to be selecting. And so as you see, as I bought enough time talking and changing, in 2 minutes, this is not the provisioning time of the VM, this is not the deployment time of the pod, this is the whole thing. This is from empty to deployed, pull time, pod deployment, scheduling, and provisioning itself. And so 2 minutes for 30 pods should not be too bad, I hope. And we actually have the goal to bring this down into 90 seconds in the near to medium term, it's definitely still this year. So expect to see that go even faster very soon. And if you look at what the VMs are, you can see that we now have 2 VMs, and it's our D32 provision ones that are concluding, and you're going to get the new 8 replicas into this new D32. So same process by the provisioner taking care of actually deciding which SKU and putting the pods into the right SKU. So they're not just going to go to any empty VM, they're going to go exactly to the node that we created, fit for purpose for them, exactly. So that bin packing is the best possible one. Now there's one more thing, is that you can actually play around with this a lot, right? Because you have regular MD64, Intel-based x86. You have ARM64, which is cheaper. Also the proverbial, price for performance is very interesting. You have Windows, AMD. However, a lot of these might require different things. I mean, ARM64, you actually need to target that architecture. Then you can do that. It's not too hard. You can go to ACR, you can target that architecture, you can compile it forward. In other cases, you can test it. Still not perfect, though. And so that's one of the things, I think Corey mentioned, we might have Ralph. We never know. It's a Quantic person. He might show up. He might not. We hope he shows up. And after lunch, he's going to talk to us a bit about WASM and WASI. If you're aware, the WASM Day is also ongoing today. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. We don't want you to miss out on anything. So we're going to recap everything that is happening on the WASM Day as well today in Ralph's session. But the thing that is interesting is one of the key interesting tenets of WebAssembly is portability. And so the interesting piece is, now imagine that what you just saw would enable ARM, AMD, Windows, and it could not care. It would just provision what was fastest, what was available, what was cheapest, what was more performant. And your workload would just run anywhere without a care in the world. So when we add WASM and WASI to this, that's exactly what happens. So you see at the top the typical Azure vote in containers, and it's actually struggling because sure, it runs on one, but on the rest, it's a Windows. So you need Windows. On the other one, it's ARM. You need the ARM. It's going to not be able to pull that image. On the lower part, the one that I have highlighted there, WASI just runs. So it's just going to be deploying those modules anywhere and the exact same code. That node goes down, another one comes up that is Windows, yeah, it runs. Another one comes up that it's ARM, that is cheaper because the provisioner decided, yep, it runs. So now you can literally let the system work itself, and you can do this with containers as well. So you don't need to freak out if you're not ready to adopt WASM and WASI right now. You can build multi-arc images and make sure to do that, and that is doable. But this should further simplify your development process, should further simplify your operational process by just letting the system pick what's best and having your application be portable across all of these architectures. All right. Hopefully, point 1 was interesting. Let's go to point 2, maximize value. So how do we maximize value? Why do we need to think about maximizing value? So on one hand, there's a clear notion that while cloud is where you probably can be more productive, more efficient, even more cost-effective, edge computing, hybrid computing is not only unlikely to go away, but likely a necessity and a key tenet of the future of computing and of your businesses. But how do you actually retain or increase productivity in these type of environments, where oftentimes you were making a hard choice between streamline and easy of just staying in one environment, or yes, going to multiple environments, but now really, really, really struggling with governance, with consistency, with standards, with all those things. The other point is about performance. As I mentioned, in order to maximize this, you want to make sure that you're doing so reliably and you do so in a performant way. So you want your workloads to be the most reliable ones. You don't want to, use all of this, maybe simplify everything, take the most out of, the cloud, and then have an outage the next day. So you want to do so with resilience, and you want to do so in a way that, again, delivers on your business metrics, the latency, the time that you need, the proximity to the users that you need. So value without compromise is essentially what I'm talking about here. And finally, and we're going to have a talk really dedicated about this today as well, is the costs of downtime are on average about $300K per hour for enterprises. That's a lot of dollars, signs out there that you could be investing in different ways. So how can you actually reduce this and achieve this, and how can AKS help with it? So we're going to have a talk later today as well, focusing exclusively on having more and resilient applications, being more distributed and more scalable. All right, so hopefully I talked a little bit about the why, and hopefully you are interested in the why and the what. So let's talk a little bit about how you can actually realize full cloud-native potential value. So on one hand, AKS delivers a first-class end-to-end portfolio for applications, not just the managed platform, but the integrations with all of the Azure platform delivers on pretty much the rest of the part that you need, be it from monitoring perspective, security, guardrails, all the necessary components there. You might know that we have the managed service for Prometheus that is GAing really, really soon next month. You might be aware that we have the managed Grafana that is GA. And we've just announced the AKS managed backup that allows you to use backup vaults to back up your cluster, back up your persistent volumes, all within the safety, security of the Azure environment and the Azure Backup Vault. You might know that you can have, again, as I mentioned, pretty much the title of our talk today, you can have globally scalable and reliable services. And you can do so leveraging full-on SLA, zones. You can also use free clusters if you need for, say, development, again, PR dev purposes. We're going to be providing unified management for development and operations of environments at scale, be it AKS clusters in the cloud or edge devices or a combination of both, and providing that consistency through Fleet Manager and Arc, and obviously our span of edge devices like Edge Essentials or AKS HCI. And not just that, but we have a really rich ecosystem of partners and ISVs that provide fit-for-purpose solutions that you can deploy at one click with no fuss, with no need to renegotiate or work out licenses or whatever it is. The same ease of use of deploying an AKS cluster and some of our first-party solutions you can do with our ISV solutions as well. So if there's something really specific that you need that we haven't done, first off, I apologize, we're on it. But in often cases, it's going to be really specific to your business. It might not be suitable for us to even go into that, maybe today, maybe ever. That's really where our partner ecosystem excels, where our ISV solutions excel, where they're built specifically for that use case, for your business, and to maximize that. And you don't need to compromise. You don't need to, go outside of the box in order to do that. You can do that with a fully supported solution from the partner, directly from the Azure portal. And finally, one of the places, as I mentioned, workload performance is key. And we've been working tirelessly in multiple areas. You saw scale a little bit before, but we've also been working a lot on networking. So outside of compute, we've worked a lot on networking and a lot on the performance of networking. So, recapping, the cloud-native path that we try to create is one that is end-to-end for you, where you can literally pick and choose from the whole ecosystem of Azure and Microsoft to have end-to-end story for whatever you need. Now, you want to replace any of these icons and even more, because this is never complete, with your solution of choice, with a partner and ISV solution, with a built in-house solution. You should be absolutely able to. This is Kubernetes after all, and you can literally choose your own adventure and your own story. I mentioned performant networking. And so we're happy to announce the general availability of Azure CNI Overlay, which is our overlay solution for Azure CNI that allows IPs to come from fully private ranges instead of just the VNet. Good day that I can say just the VNet as something that is bad. So we continue to have Azure CNI fully available and for the foreseeable future for cases where you want the IPs to be in the VNet and to be able to, for example, talk to each other. But Azure CNI Overlay allows you that overlay capability of non-routable IPs. Moreover, though, we didn't do this, as just a plus of KubeNet. We did it to have none of the downsides, none of the risks of KubeNet. So it has no route tables, no rerouting, and it is also not a VXLAN solution. It has no encapsulation and decapsulation performance hit, none of these things. Moreover, it also works with our new data plane that is currently in preview and about to GA, yes, which is the Cilium and eBPF data plane. And for those of you that are curious on what the result is, as you look at, be it throughput, be it the CPU, be it the UDP throughput, any metric that you use, and I encourage you, and we definitely encourage you to check these out. These are our tests, but using the traditional network benchmarks from Kubernetes. You have more throughput, you have both TCP and UDP, you have about the same CPU and memory consumption that in essentially flat networks, so essentially traditional CNI. So you get a lot more than KubeNet, you get a lot more than VXLAN solutions, and you get a lot less in terms of processing. I'll leave this there pretty quickly. Again, the key differences between KubeNet and CNI is essentially has none of the limitations. Key things, it works both in Linux and Windows. It goes all the way to 5,000 nodes, our current maximum, 250 pods per node. Has performance on pair with basically VNet to VNet communication, and it supports both of our data planes and even more network policies in KubeNet today. We're not done. I am? You stole 10 minutes. So we are happy to announce the Istio Service Mesh add-on. So what happened here? So as you might know, a few years back, we developed, essentially at the collaboration with CNCF and the ask of the community in partnership with folks like Tigera and Isovalent and a lot of others, something called OSM, Open Service Mesh. The idea was to create a really slimmed down, streamlined service mesh solution based out of Envoy, which was the CNCF component and kind of the future of proxies out there. Istio was not a viable option at the time because it had a very curtailed governance. It was essentially had its own foundation, kind of pretty much uni-company controlled. And so that didn't seem viable for us and for a lot of our partners in the community. It was also pretty bulky and had, I think it's still pretty bulky, but it had a more lagging architecture, say that way. Now, nothing is static, and as 100% of the times, you'll see that just the best thing will win, the community will always win, the innovation will always win, and that's a good thing. And so we're quite happy to kind of align to that as things change necessarily. So Istio is now the path to be part of the CNCF with the donation to the CNCF. The architecture is much better now. We're exploring even with ambient and other cases, kind of sidecarless options. The community is vibrant. The feature set is rich. And again, our customers asked, why don't you just use Istio at this point? It doesn't seem like any of the original constraints are there anymore. And we agreed, you're right. And so we've heard all the challenges, and we're announcing now the Istio add-on, where we're going to be managing the life cycle, we're going to be managing the installation, the management of the control plane. So I can actually show this in the architecture view. Everything from the control plane is going to be managed. We're going to be providing external and internal ingresses. You can use Gateway with it, you can use Ingress, whatever your choice is of API. And we're going to be allowing you to automatically select the namespaces to inject taking care of everything for you. We're going to take care of matching the versions of Istio to the versions of Kubernetes and AKS. We're going to do those tests, and we're going to do the upgrades of the control plane as well. You're going to be essentially able to control, if you want, the actual upgrade of the data plane. So if you want the control plane to upgrade and then slowly go, let's say, namespace by namespace, as the cluster upgrades and as you wait for it, you can do that as well. So again, having that flexibility without compromising the manageability aspect of it. If you want fully automated, you can do that as well. And the best thing is you actually get to have full integration with things like Azure Managed Prometheus and Grafana. So the quick thing that I'm going to show you is obviously the enablement. And then the easiest way to get the out-of-the-box experience. I'm not going to do the full Istio demo. I'm sure most of you know what a service mesh demo looks like. You know, standard reviews, API, import API, doing V1 to V2, nothing too complex. The only key thing that I want to show you is, again, these are all the standard services from pretty much all the service mesh demos out there, publishing, you know, the products, publishing the reviews, the ratings. And once we deploy all this, the interesting thing about it is, let's just confirm everything is running, right? So you have, as I mentioned, ratings, reviews, the products, and the details page for each product. And everything should be running accordingly. And immediately the sidecar was injected. So you see 2 containers per, essentially per pod in this case. Now, we can just easily enable the external ingress right there. And you can also enable the internal one, and you'll see it deployed automatically for you. You don't need to deploy it manually. You can just tell AKS, hey, deploy me an ingress controller, and we'll do that. And in this case, it's going to be the Istio ingress gateway. And you can have 2 of them, one internally, one externally. And the next piece that is really important outside of, you know, all the components that we have that we're managing, like DNS, metric server, et cetera, to make sure that Istio runs well and performs well in the cluster, is ensuring that you also have the direct integration with our monitoring and metric solutions. So once we deploy a few, you know, destination and routing rules, and we route everything to V1, as you can see basically in this part. Oh no, I couldn't speed up. Yeah, I shouldn't try to speed up. Oh no. All right, let me quickly exit this view. And this is gone. All right, so what I wanted to show you, but we're a bit running out of time and Corey's going to tackle me soon, is once you enable the Prometheus add-on and once you enable the Grafana add-on, you're actually going to be able, I'm happy to show you this demo later today and also throughout the week in the booth, you're going to get a Grafana dashboard out of the box, integrated with Istio, so you have the latency of all services, so you can test fault injection, so you can test latency from all the services to each service, each microservice to each microservice, so all of that out of the box as you enable the Managed Prometheus add-on and Grafana. Now, you can install all those dashboards yourself. The value that we're trying to provide there is this out-of-the-box easy experience. And to kind of wrap on this one is obviously the ability to have that consistency across the edge. So with Fleet Manager, and you might already know several of the things here, from Azure AD for authentication, from Azure Policy for consistency and policy and governance, Defender for security, Azure Monitor to get all of these environments in one place. And if you saw the session on demand or on site in Detroit, the last KubeCon, I demoed Fleet Manager there, specifically the Kubernetes configuration propagation, as well as the L4 networking. So if you want to see those 2 pieces, definitely check that on-demand session. It's on our website as well. And you'll see that demo and a full session about Fleet and its roadmap. But it's not just that. It's about how you do that propagation, how you can keep your processes. So if you're using GitOps, you can just point to the Fleet and say, hey, I want my, again, V1 to V2, and I want this across all of my regions. And Flux doesn't need to care which regions. It doesn't need to care about reconciliation. It doesn't need to care about health checks. That's all Kubernetes. So the hub is going to take care of doing that. It's going to deploy to whatever placement topology you decided, whichever region, whichever costs or constraint that you put in, and it's going to deploy and maintain it there, like Kubernetes maintain your deployments running and your pods running. It's going to do the health check and ensure that they're running there according to your topology spread. You can do this across Kubernetes. You can do this across the edge through Arc enabled, be it provisioned clusters, like our, again, Edge Essentials or Stack HCI, or even any cluster that you onboarded through Arc. And finally, yes. Actually, there's two finalies. One is recapping just really quickly the GA of Edge Essentials, AKS Edge Essentials, which we did month and a half ago, which is our light edge solution. And if you're asking what light edge or heavy edge, which are two things that we talk about, is, just think the footprint of the devices that we're talking about. So we have Azure Stack HCI as the actual bulkier, heavier edge device that you can have. With the hardware, put it there, and Edge Essentials as lighter devices. You can literally have this in single VM clusters or multi-VM clusters that you can install pretty much in any VM that meets these hardware requirements. And if you're looking for an experience, it's actually the first time that we're going to be able to, at KubeCon, bring AKS quite literally to you. So we're going to have an Intel and UC at the booth that you can try out, and you can play around with an AKS cluster at our booth as well, quite literally in there. And as I mentioned, our marketplace solution really delivers the cherry on top of all of this by actually enable all the partner ecosystem and for you to be able to interact with all our partner ecosystem. Now the last part, now it is the last part, that I mentioned was the ability to kind of leapfrog with unique innovation, to emerge stronger with differentiation. And the way to really do that is to be able to harness all the productivity and speed, to be able to infuse your applications, services, environments with artificial intelligence, with Copilot capabilities to assist you and to assist your teams and developers, and to use that productivity to stay continuously ahead. So what do I mean by this? Now, we're working on a lot of things, and at Build, we're going to be showing a lot more, but I wanted to give you a sneak peek as the last information I'm going to give you. So here, we're going to join two things that we've been working on. One is called kubectl AI. That is going to allow you, it's a kubectl plugin today, that essentially allows you to quickly create essentially whatever you need. So for this case, we're going to be creating what seems to be a very simple deployment using natural language. So please create a deployment using this image and a service for it in this namespace. And it does, and you can immediately reprompt, or you can apply it as is. Looks good for everyone? Yes? No? Any problems with it? No one wants to take the risk? I can tell you it deploys. So we're going to apply this, and everything looks fine, right? It deployed. We can go ahead and get. We had this done for us. Fantastic. I didn't have to Google some YAML. I didn't have to craft it from scratch. Fantastic. Everything is running. No panic so far. But now we're going to do a quick port forward. And as we look into it, what's going on? Don't worry, this is a video. It will work at the end. So what's going on here? So we're looking at the logs, and there's some problem here. I can't connect to this one. I don't really know what's going on. So we have something else. So we have KubeCopilot that is going to actually look at our environment and tell us what's going on. So in this case, you can use it for many things. We're going to use it for diagnose in this quick demo. So we're going to diagnose what just happened. What did I just do? Where did I mess up? By the way, I didn't mess up. It was the AI, right? I don't usually mess up. So we're going to use Copilot, and we're going to say, let's diagnose what's happening here. So we're going to diagnose our node app right here. And it's going to start to do some checks, and it's going to start to look at what possible problems might be happening. And it's going to tell you some things. Hey, maybe try do this. Maybe execute that. Let's try and gather more information. I don't see anything particularly wrong right away. Let me try and gather some more information, dig a bit more into it. Maybe look at the logs. Then there's an interesting observation. Hold on. Listening on port 3000. What port did I told this to be exposed? Let's run this again. And if I run this again, it seems that the AI defaulted into our good old friend 8080, but it's not exposed on 8080. So the AI actually went to the container and noticed what port is being exposed and said, hey, hold on a minute, this is not going to work like this. So you can just reprompt and just literally say, hey, change the container port to 3000, you dummy AI, and then we can literally apply it again, and now it's going to work. So I find this extremely powerful because it both allows me to diss the AI at the same time as, a point for me, because I had to actually figure out what was wrong. But at the same time, this is a task that would probably take quite a lot more time, even how simple it is of actually debugging, like what's going on, like everything looks normal, everything. That's why I was kind of tricking you to saying something, because everything looked perfectly fine, but it wasn't. And so it really showcases the power of having, co-pilot assistants with the humans really on the driving seat to help us out in this one. All right, so this is it for me today. I wasn't tackled. I'll be around for any questions that you might have throughout the day. And again, we're going to be at the booth all week for those of you attending KubeCon. And I'm going to come back later today to talk a little bit about troubleshooting and to talk a little bit about what's next and answer all your questions. All right.